When something good happens, the vast majority of earthly leaders lift themselves up. Have you noticed this? I am the greatest. In my administration, we achieved this. Under my watch, profits soared by this amount. When something goes well, earthly leaders say, look at me. Look at what I've done for you. Celebrate me. Earthly leaders, like the wicked kings of Israel, want to be seen and want to be adored. They want to take credit and they want to be celebrated, but woe to these leaders because they are wicked and will be judged. The prophets, the truly godly ones, they don't want to be seen. They don't want the spotlight. They want God. Have you noticed that Elijah follows? He does not lead. Our culture, and maybe someone can explain this, I don't know. Our culture is obsessed with leadership. You hear this word all the time? Leadership. I hear it all the time in the church. The Bible talks about it almost not at all. You will not find the Bible lift people up and be like, that dude is a leader. His strategic, assertive direction. The people the scriptures lift up and call us to model are those who humble themselves and listen. Who are the models? Those who follow, who are quiet and still and slow, who God speaks and they say, I believe you and I will follow. It is not the leaders the scriptures call us to be, it's the followers. Elijah cannot stand up at the end of this and say, I know there was a famine and drought, so strategically I moved us next to the creek, waiting for birds to feed us. And when that drew up, I went to this town, to the widow who was broke and dying of starvation. Did you see how ridiculous the plan looks? Am I making sense? On paper, this plan looks ridiculous. But when you see it happen, when it plays out before our eyes, we are left saying, who but God could do this? Elijah said to her, don't be afraid. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. There will always be flour and olive oil left in your containers until the time when the Lord sends rain and the crops grow again. If God says it, he will do it. The widow did just what Elijah said, and just what Elijah said would happen, happened. So I'm pleading with you to see the simple dependence of Elijah. And can you try to imagine how free your life might become if you embraced the simplicity and dependence of Elijah? Meaning, if God says it, believing he will do it. And being free from the need for it to make sense. Being free from the need for all the dots to line up. A couple of quick examples. All the tensions and divisions, and we all know all the things, and everybody's fussing and fighting. And Jesus said, love your enemies. So do that. Try it. See what happens. Do you know what Jesus said to do for those who don't like you? He said to pray for them. If you feel like someone is really mad at you or doesn't like you, watch what happens when you start praying for them. Here's an uncomfortable one. Jesus said it's better to give than it is to receive. So if you don't give anything, why don't you try? You know, it's the one thing in the Bible God says, test me on this and see what happens. And I'll just tell you, this is so uncomfortable. I've been working at churches for 20 years. It was hard to believe. And you know how many times I've seen someone say, I'm going to try giving to the Lord, and the Lord totally left them destitute, and things just got worse for them? I've seen it, I think, 0 times. And now you're like, oh, the church just wants my money. I'd give it to someone else. Don't give it here. Just try. Take a posture of generosity with your stuff and brace yourself for what happens. Try it. If God says it, he will do it. Christianity, following Jesus doesn't have to be nearly as complicated as we make it out to be. His directions are pretty clear. Now, why it's so hard for you to trust him, that's complicated. Come to the class tomorrow night. That's hard, working out what's going on down here that makes trusting people so difficult. But what Jesus is saying, come to me. Don't work so hard. Take a day off. Ooh, maybe we should talk about that one. Take a day off. Take a whole day off and let God run the universe. See what happens. If God says it, he will do it. So follow him. There's your sermon. Will it make sense? Of course not. The stories tell us it won't, and then very explicitly, Paul tells us it won't. The fact that it doesn't make sense is part of God's strategy to reveal himself to the world. To the church in Corinth, Paul said this, "Since God in his wisdom saw to it that the world would never know him through human wisdom, he's used our foolish preaching to save those who believe. It's foolish to the Greeks who seek human wisdom. When we preach that Christ was crucified, the Jews are offended, and the Gentiles say it's nonsense. This foolish plan of God is wiser than the wisest of human plans, and God's weakness is stronger than the greatest of human strength." So ask yourself, what kind of God would use ravens, streams, and starving widows to feed a prophet? And I would say to you, the same God that would be revealed as a child, that would heal as a doctor, that would suffer as a servant, that would die like a criminal, and that would raise like a king. Who but God would do this? You won't see God's provision coming. It may not be obvious, but that doesn't mean it's coming. This makes every day so exciting. Every prayer, every problem, if God says he will do it, he said he'll never leave me. How will I see you today? You said you will care for me. How will you care for me today? You said you've gone to prepare a place for me. How will I experience that today? So all I really wanted to say to you guys, if he said he'll do it, he'll do it. Amen. If you're willing and able, stand with me and we'll pray.